wait a second. Rage Against the Machine is a blues rock band? Tom Morello is the riff rock master. Now, I define riff rock as rock riffs that are predominantly single notes played in the lower register, maybe a sprinkling of chords and double stops, and saturated in groove. Now, Rage Against the Machine is loaded with groove, and Tom Morello is the king of riff rock. You put those two together, and you get a band that can move a crowd like I've never seen before. Now, today, I want to take a look at 3 Tom Morello riff rock riffs. Now, these 3 are in drop D, so we're going to examine that mode because I think it's a great mode to play riff rock riffs in. But the interesting thing I discovered while doing this is that Rage Against the Machine is actually a blues rock band. Yes, you heard it here first. Rage Against the Machine is a blues rock band. Now, I don't know why they have to put rock bands into different categories of classic rock, alternative rock, grunge rock, rap rock. But Rage Against the Machine, okay, maybe they're a bit of a fusion band, but at their core, they're actually a blues rock band. And I'm going to explain why while we examine 3 Tom Morello riff rock riffs in drop D. You with me? Let's get started. So if you've been jamming Rage Against the Machine riffs for a long time, then I likely am stating the obvious here to you. But if you're a more casual observer of Rage Against the Machine, you might not notice the blues riffs hiding underneath the rap vocals and the real funky rhythms. But in fact, if we look at Testify here, right from the very first chord, that's a D7 sharp 9, also known as the Jimmy chord. If we played it on an E, doesn't get any bluesier than that. But because we are in drop D, now drop D is just taking the E string and dropping it down to a D. Everything else is in standard tuning. What that does, that gives you this really sort of darker bottom end. You have this open D chord, power chord, and then you can move it with single fingers and do some really cool riffing. But everything else on top is the same, so you don't have to relearn the whole neck. But as we look sort of deeper into Testify, every note in this riff is based on the pentatonic scale, and we all know the pentatonic scale. Whenever our brain quits and we can't think of what to do, we always gravitate to the pentatonic scale. It's something that plagues all guitar players, don't worry about it. But there's nothing wrong with it. A pentatonic scale basically is a minor scale without any thirds in it, and it applies in a lot of situations. It's quite forgiving. That's the reason why we gravitate to it when we have to. But as I said, in Testify with that D7 sharp 9 chord and all of the notes inside of this riff, part of the pentatonic scale, is evidence that, at least in part, that Rage Against the Machine is in fact a blues rock band. By the way, in an effort to prevent this video from getting blocked, I created my own backing tracks, if you're wondering why they don't sound exactly like Rage Against the Machine. But they're great to jam to, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop them on my Patreon page. So if you want to grab those and practice to them, I'll put a link to my Patreon in the description. So one thing Tom Morello does that often sort of disguises some of the basic pentatonic shapes in his riffs is by adding some of those notes in between. Now, we talked about the pentatonic scale, right? Now, often what I do is I'll just fill up some of those notes in between instead of the basic. I'll actually play the semitones in between. And there's a nice, and if we're looking at the D pentatonic, this G sharp. So just adding those notes in between just makes it a little bit more interesting. So this riff that I just played, if you look at it as a pentatonic scale, let's play it sort of in a natural pentatonic. It would sound something like this. It sounds more like a Led Zeppelin riff, right? But he uses those semitones in between, going a little sharp or flat sometimes. And we get that there, which creates a lot of interesting tension and that riff. And that one, which he jams with the bass guitar, again, it's They could have played it as an octave. Certainly not as interesting. Really, really, really cool. So exploring some of those in-between notes inside of a standard pentatonic shape, you'll find some really interesting flavors in there. Well, let's take a listen to the main riff of that song and see if you can spot the blues riff. Hey, if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that bell. If you are new here, I wear a hat in my videos, not because this is a Tom Morello video, I just do. Anyways, I'm also on social media, especially on Facebook. I've got the Lonely Rockers Club on Facebook. It's a great place to hang out. I'm there, some of my friends, some other YouTubers. We love talking music, gear, and production. Hope to see you there. Link is in the description. So, did you spot it? Right there. If we move that up an octave, remember those notes in between in the pentatonic scale? Well, that's a blues riff right there. He's just playing it down an octave in this drop D mode that we're in. It's simply a blues riff. As I said, Rage Against the Machine, a lot of their riffs are rooted in these cool blues riffs, but they've built on top of them. Again, with, Tom Morello using those sort of DJ effects. By the way, this is not that video where I'm revealing how to do some of those effects because I don't have all the tools here. But just looking at the major structures of these riffs, these are blues riffs. And we can see that in the third example. So the last example here, Freedom, is not that different from Testify. Okay, we don't have that D7 sharp 9 chord, but basically it's played in the same position with very similar notes. And it's just very, very aggressive. Everything working together. Really sort of those dirty rhythms. Really, really love that. But there's something in here which I want to note, sort of as an extension to the last example, are those notes in between. That little run that they do occasionally. Again, if we look at the pentatonic scale, and then we add those notes in between. It's right in the heart of that pentatonic scale. Using those notes in between just sounds very, very, very bluesy. So I think in sort of looking at all of these riffs together, we can kind of get an idea where sort of the influence of these riffs came. Now, Rage Against the Machine packages this up like no other band that I can think of. I mean, with Tom Morello's very unique approach to it and those DJ effects that he does and the way he utilizes, the whammy pedal and the wah-wah pedal with the volume knob and, switching his the toggle switch. Really, really cool what he does. You've got, the rapping vocals, you've got that solid funky rhythm section, and the whole political themes that really creates an experience. But if you look at those blues riffs, and I really strongly believe in a lot of cases where songs that become really popular, they identify with a large audience because there's something familiar about it. It feels like their own. And blues riffs are the foundation of rock music. Everything has grown from that point. And not that you have to sound like a blues player, but there's a lot to be learned. I mean, Led Zeppelin, I think, were the kings of that, right? Where it was all blues riffs, but they sort of took it to a level no one had ever done at that point. So in looking at what Rage Against the Machine is doing, specifically Tom Morello, with those wonderful riffs, all based around very simple pentatonic scales, and they're just adding his own flavor to everything. You can look at that yourself, use a drop D, find those pentatonic shapes, make darker sounds, or, find other, if you want alternate tunings, or just use the same tunings. But you can work on the very basics of blues riffs, and then you can build off from there, because there's a lot of good that can come from there. So I do hope that, showing you these riffs in this perspective sort of enlighten you a little bit and show you that some things are not as hard as they sound once you start to dig into them. And if you can understand where they're coming from, you can find a place for yourself to find your own originality, but based on some foundational knowledge that most guitar players are drawing from. So there's my little expose on Tom Morello and Rage Against the Machine. So do you agree with me? Is Rage Against the Machine at its core a blues rock band? Would love to hear your thoughts on that. If you got anything else to say, that's what the comment section is for. If you did enjoy this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that bell. If you want to do a deeper dive with me, I'm on Patreon. I have affiliate links, all sorts of ways to support this channel, including some merch. Every little bit helps. It's in the description, and I really appreciate that. But the most important thing is to check out another video. I've got one waiting for you right here. And remember, you don't need a band to rock and roll. And I look forward to seeing you again in another video.